The Observer's Dilemma. Senior military anthropologist Zextal adjusted his environmental suit as he stepped out of the shuttle onto Earth's soil for the first time. The gravity felt oppressive, the atmosphere thick with moisture and varying temperatures that his species found deeply uncomfortable. Yet here he stood, tasked with understanding how this death world had produced not one, but dozens of distinct warrior cultures. "Welcome to the International Military Observatory, Ambassador Zextal." A human female greeted him, her uniform bearing the insignia of the United Earth Defense Force. "I'm Colonel Sarah Chen, your liaison for this evaluation period." Zextal's external sensors registered her core temperature at 37 degrees Celsius, a temperature that would have cooked his species alive. These humans didn't just survive in conditions that should kill them, they thrived in them. "Thank you, Colonel," he replied through his translator. "I must admit, I found the preliminary reports difficult to believe. Your species has deliberately developed different military specializations based on geographical regions." Colonel Chen smiled, a gesture Zextal had studied but still found unsettling. "That's exactly what makes Earth's defense forces unique. Follow me to the observation deck. We're about to begin today's demonstration." The facility's observation deck overlooked a massive training ground that contained multiple climate-controlled environments. Through the reinforced windows, Zextal could see arid desert zones, tropical rainforest simulators, Arctic tundras, and urban warfare centers, all operating simultaneously. "Our first demonstration today will be from the Australian Outback Division," Chen announced, directing his attention to the desert zone. "They've developed what we call environmental integration warfare." Zextal watched in fascination as figures emerged from the sand itself. Human soldiers, their skin covered in photoreactive camouflage that mimicked the desert's heat signature, moved like desert predators. Their movements were completely different from any military doctrine he had studied. "Notice how they used the terrain's thermal variations to mask their approach," Chen explained. "Australian Special Forces have adapted to treat extreme heat as an ally rather than an enemy. They can operate in temperatures that would incapacitate most other Earth forces, let alone off-world troops." The demonstration continued as the Australian unit neutralized their training objectives without ever fully revealing their positions. Zextal made careful notes, his earlier skepticism beginning to fade. "But this is just one approach," Chen continued. "The Russian Federation took an entirely different path. Their Siberian Guard program focused on surviving and fighting in extreme cold, developing internal temperature regulation that borders on biological impossibility." The observation deck's displays showed footage from the Arctic zone, where soldiers moved through blinding snow with the same ease as the Australians in their desert. These warriors had undergone cellular modifications that allowed them to generate heat without burning extra calories. Their bodies adapted to treat sub-zero temperatures as optimal conditions. "Colonel," Zextal interrupted, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his diplomatic restraint. "How can one species produce such radically different martial adaptations?" "The genetic diversity required. That's the beauty of it," Chen replied. "We didn't need extensive genetic engineering. Earth itself shaped us. Each region's challenges created natural selection pressures that we simply accelerated." The displays shifted again, showing the rainforest zone where Brazilian jungle warfare specialists demonstrated their own unique capabilities. These soldiers moved through the dense vegetation with impossible grace, their bodies modified to process oxygen more efficiently in the humid environment. "But surely this level of specialization creates vulnerability," Zextal argued. "If Australian desert troops were deployed to Siberia." "That's where you're wrong," Chen interrupted gently. "Watch this next demonstration carefully." The facility's environmental controls suddenly shifted. The desert zone became a frozen wasteland, the Arctic zone a steaming jungle, and the rainforest a scorching desert. Zextal expected the specialists to withdraw. Instead, he watched in amazement as each unit adapted their techniques to the new environments. their specialized training providing unexpected advantages even in opposite conditions. You see, Ambassador, we didn't just create environmental specialists. We created adaptive experts. Australian desert troops use their heat management skills to preserve warmth in cold environments. Russian cold weather operators apply their energy conservation techniques to survive in the desert. Brazilian jungle fighters use their oxygen processing abilities to thrive in thin mountain air. Zextel's notes became increasingly frantic as he observed the cross-environmental demonstrations. His original mission had been to evaluate Earth's military potential as a possible threat or ally. Now he realized he was witnessing something far more significant: the evolution of warfare itself. How many distinct combat specializations has Earth developed? He asked, dreading the answer. Colonel Chen's smile returned, wider this time. How many environments does Earth have? How many cultures? How many challenges has humanity faced? That's your answer, Ambassador. We didn't create an army. We created an evolutionary tree of warriors, each branch adapted to its own challenges, but capable of sharing its strengths with the others. As Zextel watched the continued demonstrations, a new understanding dawned on him. Earth wasn't just a death world that produced warriors. It was a crucible that had forged something far more dangerous, a species that turned deadly environments into training grounds and survival challenges into military advantages. His report to the Galactic Defense Council would need serious revision. Earth wasn't a potential threat or ally. It was a military revolution waiting to be unleashed on an unsuspecting galaxy. Seeds of evolution. Zextel's second day of observations began in a secure facility deep beneath the Ural Mountains. The institutional lighting cast harsh shadows across the laboratory equipment, making the already alien environment feel even more foreign to his sensibilities. What you're about to witness is classified level Alpha, Colonel Chen explained as they passed through another security checkpoint. Each nation guards its enhancement programs carefully, but the Russians have agreed to give you unprecedented access to understand our different approaches. Dr. Nikolai Volkov, a severe-looking man with cybernetic implants visible along his temples, greeted them in a large observation chamber. Behind the reinforced viewing glass, a group of soldiers were undergoing what appeared to be routine medical examinations. These are our latest Siberian Guard graduates, Volkov explained, his voice carrying a hint of pride. But perhaps graduates is the wrong word. They are evolving, becoming something new. Zextel watched as one of the soldiers deliberately lowered his core temperature to near freezing levels, his skin taking on a bluish tinge. Instead of showing signs of hypothermia, the soldier's movements became more precise, more efficient. The cold adaptation is merely the beginning, Volkov continued. We discovered that humans who master extreme cold develop enhanced electromagnetic sensitivity. They can feel magnetic fields, predict weather changes, even detect approaching vehicles through minute temperature variations in the air. The demonstration continued as another soldier demonstrated this sensitivity by navigating a completely dark room filled with electrified obstacles, never touching a single one. Zextel's instruments detected no traditional sensor technology in use. But Russia is not alone in pushing these boundaries, Colonel Chen interjected. Let's move to our next observation. Their next stop took them to a hidden facility in the Japanese archipelago. Here, in contrast to the Russian program's brutal efficiency, Zextel found an approach that bordered on philosophical transformation. Dr. Sakura Tanaka, head of Japan's Human Enhancement Division, greeted them in a Zen garden that seemed out of place in a military installation. We discovered that the key to advancing human capability wasn't in fighting our limitations, but in transcending them, she explained. The demonstration area revealed soldiers performing feats that seemed to defy physics. Their movements blended traditional martial arts with something entirely new, a fusion of human capability and quantum understanding. By training our soldiers to perceive quantum possibilities, we enabled them to choose the most advantageous outcome in any given moment, Dr. Tanaka explained. They don't just react to threats, they anticipate them before they manifest. Zextel watched in astonishment as the Japanese operators demonstrated this capability, moving through lethal obstacle courses as if they had rehearsed them countless times, despite facing randomly generated challenges. "How is this possible?" he asked, his scientific mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. "We discovered that human consciousness can interface with quantum probability fields," Dr. Tanaka replied. "Our soldiers don't just observe possible futures, they learn to collapse quantum waves in their favor." The final demonstration of the day took them to Brazil's Amazon Combat Institute, where yet another approach to human enhancement had yielded unexpected results. Dr. Paulo Santos, leading their program, had taken inspiration from the rainforest itself. "We study how organisms in the Amazon adapt and evolve rapidly to environmental pressures. Then we applied those principles to human enhancement." The Brazilian soldiers demonstrated capability for rapid environmental adaptation that made even their Russian counterparts seem rigid by comparison. Their bodies could alter their metabolism in real time, processing different energy sources as needed. "Watch this," Dr. Santos said with enthusiasm, as one of the soldiers pressed his hand against a tree. Zextal's instruments detected an energy transfer as the soldier's body began processing photosynthetic energy directly from the plant. "They can derive sustenance from any organic matter," Santos explained. "More importantly, they can share this ability with standard troops through a symbiotic transfer process we're still working to understand." As the day's demonstrations concluded, Colonel Chen led Zextal back to their transport. "You're beginning to understand now, aren't you?" she asked. "Each nation took a different path, but they're all leading to the same destination. The creation of a new kind of human," Zextal replied, finally grasping the full implications, "but not through a single program or approach." "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "By allowing each nation to pursue their own path to enhancement, we didn't just create better soldiers, we created multiple evolutionary branches of humanity itself. Each one is a potential future for our species, and all of them can work together." Zextal added another note to his report. Earth's nations hadn't just trained warriors for a death world. They had used their deadly planet as a laboratory to forge the next step in human evolution, and they had done it in dozens of different ways simultaneously. The implications were staggering, and he still had more facilities to visit. The Crucible. The emergency alert shattered the preyed-on silence at the International Military Observatory. Zextal was rushed from his quarters by Colonel Chen, her usual composed demeanor replaced by focused intensity. "We have a situation," she announced as they hurried to the command center. "A Drachnid battle fleet just entered the solar system. They bypassed our outer defense network using some kind of new stealth technology." The command center buzzed with activity as holographic displays showed the incoming threat. 12 capital ships accompanied by swarms of smaller vessels. The Drachnids were known throughout the galaxy as apex predators, a species that had evolved on a world even harsher than Earth. "They're jamming our standard communications," an operator reported. "Individual nations can't coordinate their defense forces through normal channels." Chen's expression remained steady. "Then we implement the Crucible Protocol. Each nation's enhanced forces will deploy independently, using their specialized capabilities to engage the enemy where they're most effective." Zextal watched as the human response unfolded. The Russian Siberian Guard deployed first, their ships emerging from hidden bases beneath the polar ice. These vessels, crewed by soldiers adapted to extreme cold, could operate with minimal power signatures, making them nearly invisible to standard detection systems. "The Drachnids won't expect ships to function in those conditions," Chen explained. "Their own biology requires significant heat." The Japanese quantum-enhanced forces moved next, their vessels seeming to phase between multiple positions simultaneously, making targeting them nearly impossible. The Drachnid fleet's first volley of weapons fire passed harmlessly through space where the Japanese ships appeared to be but weren't. Brazilian adaptive squadrons launched from the Amazon, their biological ships, a technology Zextal hadn't even known existed. merging with and separating from each other as needed, presenting an ever-changing threat profile to the enemy. Each force is fighting its own battle, Zextal observed, but somehow they're not interfering with each other. Watch what happens next, Chen replied. The Australian desert forces emerged from hiding, their ships covered in the same heat-masking technology as their ground troops. They approached the Drachnid fleet from below the orbital plane, using the sun's radiation to cloak their advance. The Drachnids, confronted with 4 completely different types of human warfare simultaneously, began to show signs of confusion. Their fleet formation split, trying to address each threat separately, exactly what the humans had anticipated. Now, Chen ordered. Indian consciousness-enhanced pilots, their minds linked in ways Zextal still didn't understand, launched a coordinated strike that flowed through the gaps in the Drachnid formation like water through rocks. Their weapons were precisely calibrated to the frequencies where Drachnid shields were weakest, information gathered by the Russian forces' electromagnetic sensing capabilities. The Brazilian ships extended organic tendrils that connected with Japanese vessels, sharing their adaptive capabilities. The merged units began displaying quantum adaptation properties, evolving their tactics faster than the Drachnids could respond. Impossible, Zextal whispered. These enhancement programs shouldn't be compatible with each other. That's where you're wrong, Chen smiled. We didn't just create specialized forces, we created complementary ones. Each nation's program was developed with the potential for synergy in mind. The Drachnid fleet, overwhelmed by the complexity of fighting what seemed like 5 different species simultaneously, began to retreat. But the humans weren't finished. The Australian desert forces used their heat manipulation technology to create artificial solar flares, herding the enemy ships into a kill zone. You're not just winning, Zextal realized. You're teaching them a lesson. Exactly, Chen confirmed. The galaxy needs to understand that attacking Earth isn't just challenging one type of warrior. It's facing every kind of warrior humanity can imagine, all working in harmony. The battle concluded with the Drachnid fleet in full retreat, having lost 3 capital ships and dozens of smaller vessels. Human casualties were minimal, and the engagement had revealed something extraordinary. Earth's disparate enhancement programs were greater than the sum of their parts. This was no accident, Zextal said slowly. You wanted the galaxy to see this. Chen's expression turned serious. We knew someone would eventually try to test Earth's defenses. Now they'll report back that we're not just strong. We're strong in ways they can't predict or counter. As Zextal updated his report once again, he realized that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't any single enhancement program. It was their ability to take seemingly incompatible approaches to human evolution and turn them into a unified but infinitely variable defense force. The galaxy would indeed take notice, but would it understand the true implications before it was too late? Adaptive advantage. The aftermath of the Drachnid incursion brought an unexpected development. Rather than retreating to their home systems, the surviving Drachnid ships transmitted a request for diplomatic contact. Zextal found himself in the unique position of observing the first official meeting between Earth's enhanced forces and their would-be invaders. The Drachnid Warmaster, Kextrax, arrived at the neutral space station under heavy guard. His massive frame, covered in natural armor plating, dwarfed the human representatives. Yet there was something in his bearing that Zextal hadn't expected to see, respect tinged with fear. We have fought many species across many systems, Kextrax rumbled through his translator. But never have we encountered what we face today. You fight like no others. Colonel Chen led the human delegation, flanked by representatives from each nation's enhancement programs. Perhaps now you understand why Earth has remained independent despite its relatively recent arrival on the galactic stage. The Drachnid leader's secondary eyes narrowed. What we don't understand is how you achieve this level of diversity in your combat capabilities. Our intelligence suggested humans were merely tough prey species. Instead, we found ourselves fighting something else. Dr. Volkov from the Russian program stepped forward. You made the same mistake many others have. You saw Earth as a single crucible that forged a single type of warrior. Instead, it forged many. The Drachnid delegation showed signs of agitation at this. Their own species had evolved through singular, focused adaptation to their homeworld's challenges. The concept of multiple simultaneous evolutionary paths seemed to disturb them deeply. "Show them," Chen ordered. The human representatives demonstrated their capabilities, not as a threat, but as an explanation. Dr. Tanaka's quantum-enhanced soldiers phased through solid matter. Brazilian adaptives transformed their cellular structure in real time. The Russians manipulated electromagnetic fields with their minds. "Impossible," one of the Drachnid scientists hissed. "A species cannot support this much genetic divergence without fracturing." "That's where you're wrong," Dr. Santos replied. "Our diversity isn't a weakness. It's our greatest strength. Each adaptation, each enhancement program, adds to the whole without diminishing any part." Kexthrax's expression shifted to one that Zextal recognized as deep concern. "You're not just warriors," the Drachnid leader realized. "You're an evolutionary explosion in progress. Now you begin to understand." Chen smiled. "Earth didn't just make us strong. It made us adaptable in ways that even we are still discovering. Every challenge we face, every threat we encounter, adds to our capabilities rather than depleting them." The demonstration continued as the enhanced soldiers began combining their abilities in ways that even Zextal hadn't seen before. Russian cold adapters shared their electromagnetic sensitivity with Japanese quantum troops, creating soldiers who could predict and manipulate probability fields through temperature fluctuations. "This is why you allowed our attack," Kexthrax said suddenly. "You wanted us to see this, to understand." "Yes," Chen confirmed. "The galaxy needs to understand that humanity isn't just another spacefaring species. We're not even just another Deathworld species. We're something new. An experiment in directed evolution taking place across multiple paths simultaneously." The Drachnid leader was silent for a long moment before speaking again. "Our attack has only made you stronger, hasn't it? You've already adapted to our weapons, our tactics." The Brazilian adaptives were analyzing your biology during the entire battle, Dr. Santos confirmed. The Russians were mapping your shield frequencies. The Japanese were calculating probable weaknesses in your strategy. Even now, we're evolving countermeasures to threats you haven't thought to use yet. Zextal watched as the implications of this sank in for the Drachnid delegation. They had arrived expecting to negotiate from a position of strength, even in defeat. Instead, they were facing the dawning realization that humanity's potential for adaptation might be limitless. "What do you want?" Kexthrax asked finally. "The same thing we've always wanted," Chen replied. "The freedom to continue our evolution without interference. To explore what humanity can become, not just in one way, but in every way possible." As the diplomatic discussions continued, Zextal added a final note to his report. Earth hadn't just created warriors. It had created an evolutionary engine that turned every challenge, every threat, and every defeat into a new path for advancement. The galaxy would never be the same. Unity in diversity. One standard month after the Drachnid incident, Zextal stood before the Galactic Council to present his findings. The vast chamber, filled with representatives from hundreds of spacefaring species, fell silent as he began his report. "Honored Council," he began, "my mission to evaluate Earth's military potential has led me to a conclusion that will fundamentally change how we view the future of galactic civilization." The chamber's holographic displays activated, showing footage from his observations. The various enhanced human forces demonstrated their capabilities, but this time, Zextal focused on something different: the moments of interaction between different enhancement programs. "We have long understood that Deathworlds produce formidable species," he continued. "What we failed to understand is that Earth did something unprecedented. Instead of developing a single path of advancement, humanity created dozens of them simultaneously." The displays showed the aftermath of the Drachnid battle, where different enhanced forces were already sharing and combining their capabilities in new ways. The Russians can now share their electromagnetic sensitivity with Japanese quantum-enhanced soldiers. The Brazilian adaptives can merge their biological manipulation with Australian environmental mastery. Each combination creates something entirely new yet stable. A murmur ran through the council chamber. A hive mind representative raised an appendage. Are you suggesting these humans are still evolving? Even now? Not just evolving, Zextal confirmed. They're directing their own evolution along multiple paths simultaneously. Each nation's program strengthens the others without compromising its own advancement. He showed new footage. Indian consciousness-enhanced pilots merging minds with Russian cold adapters, creating a hybrid capability that could predict and manipulate battlefield conditions on both physical and quantum levels. More importantly, Zextal continued, they've turned their greatest potential weakness, their diversity, into an unprecedented strength. Each new threat they face doesn't just make them stronger, it creates new possibilities for combination and adaptation. The council chamber erupted in concerned discussion. A mechanoid representative spoke next. What are your recommendations? Zextal paused, knowing his next words would be controversial. We must redefine our understanding of species advancement. The human model of parallel evolution paths, all supporting and enhancing each other, represents something we've never seen before. The displays showed one final image. The various enhanced human forces working together during a joint training exercise, their different capabilities merging and separating like a complex dance. Earth hasn't just produced warriors, Zextal concluded. It has created an evolutionary engine that turns every challenge into a new opportunity for advancement. The humans don't just adapt to survive, they adapt to thrive. And they do it in ways that multiply rather than divide their potential. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, the High Chancellor spoke. What do these humans want? That's the most remarkable part, Zextal replied. They want to continue their experiments in peace. They're not interested in conquest or dominance. They want to explore what humanity can become, all the different paths they might take. And if they're threatened? Another council member asked. Then they will demonstrate that unity in diversity isn't just a philosophical principle. It's the most powerful military doctrine the galaxy has ever seen. The Drachnids learned this. Others will too, if they make the same mistake. As Zextal concluded his report, he added one final observation. The humans have a saying. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. They've turned this simple principle into something revolutionary. Each part of humanity strengthens every other part, creating an endless cycle of advancement that we're only beginning to understand. The council chambers remained silent for a long moment before the High Chancellor spoke again. Then we must ensure they remain at peace, not through strength or threat, but through recognition of what they represent, a new way forward for all species. Zextal looked at his final notes, then at the assembled council. They don't just represent a new way forward, he said. They are the new way forward, and they're inviting us to learn from them, to understand that diversity isn't a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be embraced. As the council session concluded, Zextal knew that the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity hadn't just survived its Deathworld origins, it had turned them into a blueprint for something entirely new. The age of single-path evolution was over. The age of infinite possibility had begun. The end.